Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and it's time to talk about today's camp notes from July 22nd, 2024. On a high level, very rainy practice. It wasn't raining right at the start, but it started to rain. It got a lot harder as practice went on. That definitely did impact the offenses. Whereas on the first day of practice, we saw two fields of 11 on 11. You still have the same number of people. Nobody's been cut, obviously, yet. Well, the group is still at 90. Let's put it that way. They just had one field of 11 on 11 in this game. Lamar Jackson, again, absent for a second consecutive day due to illness. Josh Johnson, again, getting most of the reps with some trickle down to Devin Leary and Emery as well. The passing offense has a lot of difficulty, had a lot of difficulty today with the wet ball, inaccuracy. They had some problems handling the snap today as well. Few things were going on the offensive line. I don't really believe the Ravens have reached their final number one alignment yet. At least it doesn't look that way to me. I can't talk about the exact players and positions. I'll just say it still seems like there's some movement going on. They're still maybe going through some trials of some players that they might like as backups at the position, getting a chance to play with the first unit and whatnot. So we'll see how that plays out, obviously, over the course of the next few weeks. It was something that John had talked about wanting to have decided by the time camp begins. And I think it's fair to say it has not been. So we'll see how it plays out. Again, a day where a number of players got a chance to snap the ball from center. And I can't talk about that either, exactly who it was. I'll just say most of the interior linemen got a chance at some point over the last 2 days to snap the football, which is a good way to make sure that you don't end up with nobody who can do that important thing if you end up with one or even two injuries in a game at center. So some guys had a shot here, and everything looked good. There weren't a lot of really bad snaps today, despite the weather. Is mostly mishandling the snap is what I noticed. On special teams, you get there, and special teams is the very first thing you look at. We're still waiting to see the kickoff. So we've been really excited to see special teams because of the new kickoff rule. It's the very first thing again, and it was more punt drills today, working to make sure that get off is right, that the jammers and gunners are having the appropriate battle off the line of scrimmage, that people are maintaining their blocks and whatnot, and they know what they're doing in terms of the punting group, and that people are getting off properly and working to a particular block formation. And I didn't see them do anything particularly complicated. Not that I'd be allowed to talk about it schematically anyway. In terms of the punt defenders or the punt return team. So you have some things going on there. One of the things that's true of special teams, I noticed this on the field goal team as well, is you have a lot of guys playing either on the field goal block team, which I think is primarily the case, or on the punt return team, who might not be anywhere close to candidates for that during the regular season. And part of it is you need 22 special teamers to fill out both sides of the ball on these plays. And normally you only need 11 at a time during the regular season because you only have to fill out either the offense and defense. And there's a lot of overlap in the players that play those two groups. It's true of, a player like Tavius Robinson last year, I believe played on both the kick team. It might've been a wing or one over from that. And he also played on the kick block team, for example. So you can only have him on one side of the ball when you're doing a field goal drill. And on the punt team, there's a lot more overlap. You have a lot of linebackers who play both ways, and it becomes harder and harder to fill out both those squads. You have some players on there who are just basically taking it easy on the rep, and you would hope you would not see them in terms of the regular season on a field goal block. So hopefully that's been resolved there, or it will be. You have players being smart about what they're doing at this time of year. Let's see. We had laps yesterday, two of them run from Josh Jones for a false start, for two false starts. Andrew Voorhees had to run a lap today for a false start. Seemed to be hustling it up, getting around the field pretty quickly, and wanted to put it behind him. Absentees today. I mentioned Lamar already, who was sick. Adisa Isaac is still on NFI. Keaton Mitchell and TJ Tampa are both on PUP. Apparently, TJ Tampa's had a minor surgical procedure. I did not hear the exact nature of it, but hopefully it's one that doesn't keep him out for very long. And I did not see Evander Rigby, who's a large Mike linebacker type. I did not see him yesterday, and I did not see him again today, number 57. So I'm not sure what's going on here, but I assume he'll be back tomorrow. Now, the big news is at the safety group. And over the weekend, of course, Eddie Jackson signed and had his first practice on Sunday. And today, really the news came out during practice. Daryl Worley was re-signed by the Ravens. It appears that Trace Willing was cut to make room. He was not at practice. But Daryl Worley was right back on the field today. And Harbaugh mentioned that he had healed from his pec tear that he had last year, ended his season after a very promising start last year. It's my recollection, and I haven't looked at it right now. I'm not looking at it right now, but that Daryl Worley did not have a single missed tackle last year. And I know he only allowed 21 yards on 6 targets. That's 3.5 yards per target. So as amazing as the combination of Hamilton at 4.3 and Stone at 4.7 were, it was actually Worley that was the best if you don't put a snap limitation on that. And terrific year for him and a great signing for the Ravens. Exactly what the doctor ordered in terms of a back-end safety who can play that split field, comes from a corner background, but still has the physicality, I think, to play that position on the back end. He's a little older. Obviously, so is Eddie Jackson. Jackson wants a real star in this league. Worley just had his first season at safety last year, but looked very good in limited duty. I think in a long weekend, they've pretty much found the split field safeties they need to run the defense and not have the risk of not being able to play Hamilton where they want to. So they're presumably going to want to play Hamilton a lot in that nickel, whether it's or dime, by the way, big nickel or a dime. He could play either. And they might also want to play him on the back end on some more obvious passing downs where they want a little bit better coverage guy in there covering a slot receiver. So we might see our Darius Washington back in that position, or Mollett, who did a pretty good job last year. But they have options there. We're still kind of feeling it out on the back end. They got some other players still on the roster they're taking a look at. Sunusi Kane, Bo Braid are obviously getting snaps and seeing some playing time. I think it's one or the other of them, probably at this point, if I had to guess, to make the roster. So we'll see how that plays out the rest of the way. But the Ravens really need a 4 to make 3 group of safeties to make sure they're not ever in a bad way during a game. They had several games last year where Hamilton had to be moved back exclusively to be a deeper, strong safety, or a strong safety, we'll just say, because of injuries that occurred. And since the Ravens like to start with that too high shell, even though he come down as a robber and whatnot, he's starting to play further from the line of scrimmage, and he's just going to be less impactful when he does that. Still has good instincts. He's still a good player back there, I believe, but not a player who's being maximized by having him 15 yards off the line of scrimmage, say, at the snap. So really good signing for the Ravens. I'm very excited about it. We had one interesting thing occur, and it's kind of it's a odd situation. I wasn't sure exactly what had happened. Then I saw they did it twice, and I said, I get it, I think. They have a segment where they play 11 versus colors, I call it. That's what I mark it for in my book anyway. I don't know what the actual term for the drill is, but they play 11 offensive players, and they play against a group of coaches or assistants or whatever they are who are dressed up in colored shirts to designate their positions. If you're blue, you're a defensive lineman, and there's green and red that go with that. I forget which one is defensive backs and which one is the off-ball linebackers, but each of those has their own color that they wear. And the defense is totally non-competitive. So they jump right into a brother-in-law thing. And, they're going up against, huge men. A lot of these guys are just, Ravens employees who are, not the sort of physical specimens, obviously, that the players are. And they don't really try and engage in the same way that obviously any player would or penetrate. for that matter. They don't try and do that, but they do try and just be in position kind of, and they'll go with a receiver for a little bit. Of course, nobody who's taken from the Ravens, intern staff or whatever it might be is going to be covering Zay Flowers for very long. So they tend to play some zone defenses, let's put it that way, and some defenses where they give up on the play pretty quickly. But one thing I noticed, and these guys actually, one thing that's funny about it is they actually carry several sheets of paper. So they have like a script of the plays they're running and the defensive formations. They're supposed to be simulating that the offense is then going to have to see that and make audibles perhaps at the line of scrimmage. So it's a test, obviously, of the actual players. They're testing the offense by seeing what the defense shows them at the snap. So anyway, one of the things that happened is one particular guy, one of the two defensive tackles they had, jumped off sides one side. I'm going, how do you jump off sides in that kind of a drill? And then I thought, okay, could that possibly be scripted? Because they want to make sure that the offense follows through with a play and takes the free play when that occurs. Maybe even they're supposed to immediately go to a longer pass. Something typically they talk about when you hear an announcer say free play because they've got an offsides call right at the snap, is that you want to take advantage and throw a deeper pass. Anyway, then it happened a second time. And I said, well, now it's definitely scripted. They did that for sure. I talked briefly to Patrick Gleason about it on the sideline. He thought that it might have been, it probably was, but that was a case where Monken is really trying to establish the use of pace and making sure that people know what they're doing even when disruptions occur. And so it does make a lot of sense that would happen. But I thought it was an interesting thing. I never noticed that happen in the 11 versus colors scripting before. I mentioned it was a pretty woeful day for the offense. Just going to take a drink of water here. Doing the show solo, I got to pace myself. Anyway, the defense looks suffocating. Combination of speed and the wetness of the ball, the wetness of the field, really wreaked havoc on the offense this day. Number of good defensive notes. JAD had a pass defense early, and then he had another late coming out over the top of Nelson Aguilar. Aguilar thought it was a foul, and he said so, but it was what it was. There was no flag on the play, and JAD had a couple of moments in this practice. Wiggins, this is a big one, had an interception over the middle in man coverage, so really nice ball. Harbaugh praised him for being square to the football. He said he wasn't really supposed to run the ball back directly at the coaches and the body of players. They weren't supposed to run, basically back directly towards the middle of the field. They're supposed to drag. They stand behind the play a lot of the times, is the coaches and often players from both the offense and the defense, but at least from the offense. And you're supposed to go wide if you want to get a pick six or whatever on that play. But he said Wiggins was coming at him pretty hard as he was coming downhill. Good news for the new safety crew. Eddie Jackson picked off a pass for an apparent pick six. Nice play again. Not a well thrown ball, but he got to the spot. It was maybe 10 yards. Two circle, as I call it, between the numbers and the left hash. So if you're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if you divide up the field, it would be a 2 is the space on that pass. So if you see that ever in the notes that I provide in the defensive columns, you'll see a 2 bracket that I'll put on that. But that's how I would describe the thing. Dafayowe, a fine practice. Number of times in the backfield with pressure, looked good against the run as well. Denied space well. Just a really good thing. The really good players, Owe, Hamilton, Roquan Smith, their mode of practice here is much more about avoiding contact that can cause injuries, and they're very good at it. They give up on a play. They know that the film is going to look good. They're going to look fine in terms of what they accomplished. They don't have to put their hand on the quarterback. They don't, which they should do anyway. But Roquan Smith isn't doing anything more than like getting into a hole and kind of standing up the running back. He's not trying to do anything in terms of hitting him in a certain way. And there was some contact on the field today I'm going to get to in a minute. Kyle Hamilton came off the edge on a run play, just kind of redirected the play to the inside, but didn't feel the need to even touch the running back on the play. And I thought that's clearly a veteran player, understanding that this is practice on a wet field and you should be very careful with each other. The defense actually ended up, there's a number of things that went wrong for the offense. The defense ended up with about the last 15 minutes of practice not even contesting any plays. So the ball was thrown up, including some ducks that were thrown up, and the defense made really no attempt to make a play on the football for probably the last 15 minutes of 11 on 11s. So that was, I think, fairly interesting and a function of conditions. They could have moved practice inside. They didn't do it. They decided to play out in the rain, and hopefully no one comes away from that with any kind of a injury, but it's always a little bit of risk. You also want to balance the need to play in some environmental conditions that you probably will face with the desire to keep everybody safe, this early in training camp. And particularly soft tissue injuries will take their toll this time of camp. Kyle Van Noy had a sack early on. That one was whistled dead. Sometimes they, bearing down on the quarterback, they'll just go ahead and whistle the play. Other times they don't. He had another pressure a little later on, so I thought he had a good practice. On the very next play after Van Noy's sack, Trenton Simpson blitzed in for another apparent sack. He held up on the play, and then the ball was thrown for a completion. Again, I think it was a sack, but they didn't whistle it dead there. But as far as I'm analyzing this and talking through it, I would consider it a sack by Trenton Simpson there. Broderick Washington, I thought, looked terrific today. He had a pressure on one of his pass rushes. He also penetrated for an apparent run stop. Really nice. And he was more careful about his run stop, I thought, than the next man, who was Travis Jones, who had a high clothesline contact on Derrick Henry. He's going to learn not to do that. But Travis, obviously, he's a big boy and he wants to play hard, obviously. So we get that. Probably gets a talking to by somebody on the coaching staff in terms of not having that kind of contact at this point in camp, or really at any point. They do tackle, I think, at some point with pads on, but even this is the kind of contact I think they try and avoid even with pads on. A high kind of almost at the neck area, and that's obviously can cause problems. David Ojabo, who we talked about returning yesterday, well ahead of schedule in terms of his return from injury, knocked down a pass at the line of scrimmage today. So he had another highlight. Odafe Oweh was on for the interviews, and he said that he'd done some practice with Ojabo during the offseason. And Ryan Mink kind of, I think, knew the answer to a question and really wanted to try and tee Odafe up with him, and said, up with it, and said, tell us about your relationship with David and how he's been doing this offseason kind of thing. And you can see the actual wording of the question, but he said that Odafe said that Ojabo was just waiting to show, where he is right now, that he's really excited about the season, that he's practiced very hard this offseason and tried to get in shape and whatnot. And that, he's come a long way, and Odafe seems to be highly positive about his progress and prognosis for this season. So I'm happy to hear that, because the Ravens really need to find a third pass rusher besides him and Van Noy. So that'll be good to see. It's Kyle Hamilton. Terrific day. Very much in control, as I mentioned earlier, not trying to make tackles, which is good. He came off the edge, directed a run play inside where it got bottled up, and that is all you need to do. He didn't need to make any contact himself. It looked like he was playing fine downhill defense to the receiver, which is a big part of Kyle Hamilton's game when there's live fire going on. And except Kyle Hamilton is a pretty bodacious tackler, whether he's either going right through the body or using his length exceptionally well to make tackles that'll be a little bit outside the reach of other players. And that grip strength too is really exceptional. But in this case, it's just a matter of coming downhill, showing that you're in place to hit that receiver, but not hitting him, just kind of side olaying him as you go past him. And I thought he was doing a very good job with that, and not over contesting on targets that might create injury risk as well. So really good to see Kyle Hamilton, who's had some injury issues, taking it easy on his body in the early part of camp. Saw the offense fumble a couple of different snaps. I noticed one of them was Leary in terms of doing that. Did not see whether the other one might have been Emory Jones or it might have been Johnson, but it was ball was on the ground a couple of times for the offense, which was unfortunate. And like I mentioned, the defense really ended the day not contesting plays, which is something I want them still to contest for the football without contesting to the body. So the fact that they were not contesting the ball at all is really a concession, I think, to the wet environment. And it kind of stopped raining at the very end of practice, but the field was still quite wet. And I could understand how there'd be some slipping. There had already been some contact, which led to some slippage prior to that point. So it's understandable why that would be. A couple guys looked okay on offense. I thought Rashaan Ali looked pretty good moving around the field. Derrick Henry was not terrible looking around the field. I thought he was fine. Just the defense was better in terms of being in position against the offensive line. The other guy was Rashad Bateman. Now, he had kind of a play that didn't look great early, but I think it's really on the quarterback all the way. A misfired ball that kind of went against the grain of his route. So it looked like he was kind of taking a route back towards the middle of the field, and the ball was kind of wild right. There were a lot of just a bit outside throws today, by the way. But this was one of them. And it gave up on the ball kind of early. Gave certainly the indication that he was upset with the throw. So, it's probably something he would wish he didn't do. Or maybe he wouldn't. Maybe it is the way he's going to be, and he conserves his energy, goes back and says nothing about it. But it was one of those that it didn't look great when it happened, but it was what it was. Marlon Humphrey, I think, was the one who had coverage of him on that play. Marlon had good coverage anyway. It looked like for the throw being at all on that side or even straight up, Marlon was in a good position to get either an interception or a pass defense. Had the ball been thrown more towards the left side of the field where Bateman had the left leverage on that play, I think Bateman maybe could have tracked the football and gotten to it. But anyway, one of those plays, Bateman obviously appeared upset and possibly correctly so. Then he made up for a little later in the practice when he made an outstanding play, picking a ball right off the ground from Brandon Stephens in coverage. So probably 20, 25 yards down the left sideline. Brandon Stephens did not find the football well, went up for it, missed it. The ball was well underthrown. Bateman kind of was falling backwards towards the ground, trying to decelerate and then catch the ball, and the ball got by Stephens' arm. And Bateman was then able to kind of pick the ball directly off the ground, looked like reaching significantly back, which in this case was in front of him. So he's falling backwards. So back is in front of him, back towards the quarterback. And it was an impressive catch, and a kind of thing that you like to see from a player like Bateman, who you might have questions about that. He had another reception from Johnson that he caught in stride. Looked like that was going to go for a good yak play. So something we need to see from Bateman too is some well-timed throws, setting up some yak opportunities for him. But a good day, lots of problems solved, including the big safety issues. Despite the rain, a fairly intense practice. We've seen now 2 days, I think, of fairly intense offensive line on defensive line play, more than I'm used to at this point in camp. So even though they're not playing in pads, they're doing a little more to try and demonstrate pressure, and they're still being smart about not hitting the quarterback, obviously, and putting the skill position players at risk. So good practice again today. A lot of fun to watch, and moved inside for interviews, and they're up there now. I'll just tell you, John Harbaugh was there, and he talked a little bit about Eddie Jackson. He talked about didn't have any new news or any update on Lamar. Eddie Jackson came out, talked about the interception today, talked about appreciating playing with a Ravens team that had a lot of good players on it, obviously, and was contending for a Super Bowl. And so there were a lot of questions really about that. Didn't really get to a question of whether the Ravens could provide him, basically a structured role where he'd have a better chance to succeed. And the tenor of the conversation was not such. We're celebrating an interception, and really you're not there trying to ask the guy, well, hey, do you think the Ravens did a good job of selling you on the notion that you'd have a very restricted split field role here that's probably less than being single high or being asked to do too much within the Bears system? And I think that was positive. After seeing today Jackson get that pick, after seeing him largely be in position now for 2 days, I'm far more optimistic about Eddie Jackson's chance to fill the niche that the Ravens have as a split field guy. He had not been good in coverage, as I mentioned, for 4 years, but he had at one point 5 years ago, he's a hell of a player. He made a lot of mention of how he knew a lot of the Ravens either growing up from his time in the NFL or from his time in college, any of those three. So he played with Marlon Humphrey in college. He played either for or with Derrick Henry in college. And he knew about Zay Flowers from his time in South Florida, wasn't too far away. And I think Lamar Jackson as well. And he just basically had a lot of people that he'd known playing the game that had been there. One of the players who came up was Roquan, and apparently Roquan may have been part of a recruiting effort to get Eddie Jackson to sign here. So just looking at the safety issue and the way that the Ravens just are almost going to be forced into not being able to play defense the way they did last year, it is such a relief with the last 3 days providing a signing of Eddie Jackson and a signing of Daryl Worley. That are really two players who meet that split field need, and hopefully will keep the Ravens in a position to play defense by the same scheme they did last year, if that's what they want. So on a snap-by-snap basis, we'll see some regular nickel, but we're also going to see plenty of big nickel. And the big advantage to having these three guys now who can play two safety spots is it means that Hamilton's ability to move around the field should not be endangered. That's number one. Number two is they have an actual legitimate backup for Marcus Williams, who they really didn't have before. So hopefully, it might possibly be true that either Worley or Jackson could be that guy, but probably the first guy up in that role would be Jackson, with the Worley handling the split field responsibilities. So really good, nice last few days about solving one of the Ravens' significant problems. Well, that's it for Camp Notes today. Hope you join us tomorrow. Hit me up with a DM on Twitter if you want to ask some specific question about what's going on at camp, and I'll try and address it on the next show. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you tomorrow on Camp Notes.